Let's take a step back and look at the history of learning theories. The first one mentioned are experiential learning theories, and these are usually associated with the work of John Dewey at the turn of the century. Back then, Dewey said that if we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow. Meaning if we stay to this strict kind of, let's say, teacher-lecture style that had been common at his time, particularly in European universities, we're not going to prepare them for the future. Now remember, Dewey was saying this nearly 100 years ago. However, it echoes many of the concerns of education reformers today. If we look at a schematic of the experiential learning concept, basically it's a loop learning. But it starts with, let's say, tangible activity. First we do an activity, we review on it, we identify positive and negatives, and then we make changes. But the thing is, everything starts with experience, and so even though this might look like many different learning theories, the key is always step one. There's some tangible or concrete action or activity that spurs learning. Learning basically comes from experience. And what Dewey's point was is that mainly pragmatic experience trumped, let's say, abstract reasoning, which had become the norm at the time. A more modern version has been developed by different scholars such as David Kolb, Roger Greenway, and Chris Argyris and Donald Schoen. And this basically shows that even though the vocabulary and the jargon is a little bit different from person to person, they're basically talking about the same model. There's an act starting with a concrete experience, followed by reflection, followed by abstraction or generalization, and leading to application, leading to more concrete experiences. And this cycle goes around and round. But if we want to look at, let's say, the key of what, say, the experiential notion is that it puts an emphasis on pragmatism, pragmatic knowledge, over abstract knowledge. And also a second part of that is that Dewey was very much about democratizing education, taking education out of the hands of, let's say, a narrow ivory tower elite and putting it in the hands that everyone had the same ability to learn from their own direct experiences. Another theory is behaviorism. And behaviorism is often associated with the work of B.F. Skinner. To start with, basically what behaviorism was is there are instructions, then you take a test, you're basically judged on your performance, you get a reward, and then you learn from that. Probably the most famous example of this is Pavlov's dogs, where, for example, salivation occurs because food is presented in the dog. However, before conditioning, there's basically a bell and there's no response. The bell rings but doesn't lead to a response until it's conditioned in. In this third step, the bell ringing is associated with the food, and therefore the bell alone will lead to a response, as you find, let's say, in the final step of Pavlov's experiments. Therefore, as B.F. Skinner said, education is what survives when what has been learned has been forgotten. So, for example, the conditioned response is basically what education is. Those types of, let's say, instincts that we have even after we forgot the original association between, for example, the bell and the thing. However, many people criticize behaviorism because it basically made us into, let's say, trained animals. As this thing shows, we'll push for food. The cognitive revolution in psychology basically made a comparison between computers and the human brain. Basically, as we were developing computers, we were trying to, let's say, simulate what was happening in the human brain. So if you open up the human brain, it would look just like a set of circuits such as you see here in this cartoon. And if we wanted to diagram what was happening in the learning process, we could show it, for example, as a series of almost, let's say, on and off switches and an electrical, let's say, blueprint, with going from stimulus to short-term to long-term memory and to also different types of responses. Recently, we've had, let's say, the advent of constructivism. And constructivism is basically to put the student at the center and let students create their own information. So, for example, in the past model, it was the teacher taking the key role, telling the student what to do, what to memorize, and then also ask for reproduction of this information. In the constructivist model, for example, the teacher asks the student what they want to know, how they understand, how they learn, and the student basically just helps the teacher help himself on the learning journey.